Chapter 14, Pleasing Gods. Huffy didn't have a solid plan yet. The wolf thought that Chenerah, with his skills and knowledge of everything, had to be the key to peace. Surely he, Amarok, would first have to talk to him about the past. In any case, he would give this dog a fist, that was for sure. After all, he was the one who had escaped and wanted to get rid of his responsibility. Chenerah was to blame for letting it get this far, for getting drunk all the time and letting himself go to waste. A few weeks passed and every day Amarok drank a lot of alcohol. Again and again he blamed himself, felt hatred and sadness. He sank into self-pity, experienced a rapid decline both internally and externally. He let his apartment deteriorate more and more, did not care about himself or others. All the friends he once had turned away from him, but this left him cold. He preferred to be left alone anyway, because he no longer had any desire to serve anyone. One lunchtime there was a knock at his door and the wolf, after what felt like the 100th knock, had to pull himself together to open it. He staggered, for he was not yet sober, and pushed empty glass bottles aside to open the door a crack. "What?" he asked, annoyed and with an occupied voice. Outside, a uniformed wolf stood and saluted. "Amarok, I have a mission for you here. His Majesty the Queen invites you to an audience in her palace." He held out a letter to Amarok. "Oh man, you know what you can do? She can eat her meal alone. I want to have my peace. Go away and tell her to look at her invitation." The latter then spoke and was interrupted by his counterpart. "Sir, you must accept this offer. This is an audience with your Majesty. You cannot simply decline." The servant put his letter through the door slot and reluctantly Amarok took the letter, after which he closed the front door without further words or a goodbye. The Samoyeden, tormented by a bad headache, threw the letter on the living room table with an annoyed sigh, on which there were empty bottles, plates with leftovers and garbage. He lay back down in bed and tried to get some more sleep, because last night had not ended for him until today. However, it was impossible for him to turn off his thoughts, because he was tormented by curiosity about what Serena might want from him. A few failed attempts to fall asleep later, he got up again and went into the living room. After partially clearing the sofa, he took a seat and opened the envelope. He read that the Queen was expecting him the very next day for an event, whatever was meant by that. He was ordered to appear dressed in a suit and on time. Plenty of hunger and thirst were requested. Great, so there really is food there. It's great that they have enough money for such useless events, even though there's a war going on, Amarok muttered, not wanting to participate in this kind of squandering. However, it was clear to him, what the Queen demanded, he had to do as her subject, whether he wanted to or not. Everyone considered her a goddess, but he knew that she, too, was just an ordinary wolf. He had a hard time getting up and looking for his suit, but what had to be done had to be done. So he rummaged around in the closet and found that the rarely worn suit was surprisingly clean and wrinkle-free. So at least he didn't have to straighten this useless piece of cloth as well. The next morning Amarok bathed and cleaned himself out. The suit still fit like a glove and no one would notice that the wolf was actually neglected and unhygienic. Although everything was in place, nothing was pinching or constricting, Amarok didn't feel particularly comfortable, but constricted. Why did people have to wear such fumbling clothes even for simple food fests? Couldn't people just act like wolves and be themselves? The mail got on a fast train and went to Luna, the capital of the kingdom. Shortly before the end of the journey, he noticed that a few people were sitting in the carriage drinking beer. They must have been in their teens and were behaving as if the compartment were their living room. Loud music that was not Samoyeden in origin was echoing from their smartphones and empty beer cans filled the table where they sat. They bawled, laughed, and didn't mind that they weren't alone. There was freedom of movement for the Gajans, which is why more and more of them were found in Samojija. Not everyone liked this, but these things had been agreed between Samojija and the Earthlings because of their help in the war. The other wolves ignored the younglings without a word, and Amarok rolled his eyes as he thought to himself, "Great fellow citizens, these humans. What have we brought into the country?" When he arrived at his stop, he didn't have to walk far to spot the Queen's palace. A huge property, fenced and guarded, surrounded a magnificent white building with 3 towers. It almost looked like a fairy tale castle. A lot of emphasis was placed on glitter, glamour, cleanliness and order. Everything had to be well ordered and structured to the satisfaction of the Queen. They received a lot of visitors here and so everything had to be for the best. The young male entered the covered gate, in whose glazed cottage sat an elderly wolf, looking snobbish. Without speaking to him, without announcing himself, Amarok would not enter. He knew that, for court etiquette was widely known. "You want?" asked the well-dressed gentleman in the cottage. "Hello," the younger one began, "I am Amarok. I am expected by your majesty." He briefly held his invitation in front of the glass, and the servant, with the words "Very well, sir. You are expected," pressed the button that opened the gate to the property and provided entry. The young wolf walked along a narrow gravel path that divided the very well-kept, short-cut lawn. Gardeners were everywhere, pruning bushes and trees and squatting among colorful, large flowers, all perfectly staged. It seemed that they took care that everything would be monotonous and as far as possible not individual, especially the plants. They were all the same to their neighbors, uniformed, orderly and sterile. At the large, wooden double door leading into the building, two servants stood and curtsied as Amarok introduced himself to them and indicated that he was invited. They nobly opened both wings and bowed again. It seemed so rehearsed, uniform and exaggeratedly polite that the guest rolled his eyes again and was no longer quite sure whether it was the people or his own compatriots who were getting on his nerves. In the foyer, some suit males and dress females had gathered. That's what Amarok called them for himself, gladly showing that this was not his world. He didn't like etiquette or exaggeration. At the buffet, however, one had lost all sense. Hundreds of types of food, opulently arranged, mingled with drinks of every kind on a seemingly endless table. Everything was overflowing, and it was clear that no one was simply served food here. No, it had to be served, which the servants with nimble paws were happy to do incessantly. Centered on the wall of the hall was the empty throne where Chenerah, as regent, could rest her butt on thick, red, velvet cushions. The frame was gilded, and the wall against which it stood was lined with imperial banners and noble images of past wolf kings and queens, who were always equated with gods in this country. From somewhere, soft violin playing sounded, accompanied by a flute. Amarok did not know the song, but could hardly hear it because of the noise of the laughing gentlemen and skirmishing ladies. How they all smiled, beamed. Had they not noticed that there was still a war going on? What was so funny that it outweighed the fear? The male wondered what was supposed to happen here. Was this an important affair to which he was invited, or was it the demonstration of luxury and wealth, which should reassure the dignitaries and the people? So what? Free food. Why not? He thought and walked around, tasting a few snacks from the buffet. When a servant walked past him with a tray full of drinks, he briskly took a glass whose contents promised to contain alcohol. The drink tasted good to him, so he raised his head and pretended to be a rich, snobbish wolf. He exclaimed, "Here, here. This tastes exorbitant, downright lavish, luxurious. Yes, this is the way to enjoy yourself, after a hard day full of the etiquette and obligations of nobility." He turned around, caught another servant and grabbed another glass, replacing it with the empty one. The young wolf lifted it and rhymed, "It's nice to do nothing at all and tell yourself how hard life is." At this, some participants looked at him and wrinkled their noses. A few shook their heads and a voice asked, "Who is this fiend? Who invited him?" Another glass later, a hand grasped Amarok's shoulder and its owner spoke, "Amarok. It's good to see you. How have you been? Long time no hear." The outsider was startled, turned around and saw that it was Iraq Lion who addressed him. "Oh, hello Iraq Lion. How are things in Banadarija? What are you doing here?" "Well, I've been invited, as apparently have you. Do you know what the Queen wants? I actually have other things to do." "I don't know what that's about," Amarok began, catching sight of Chenerah about to ascend her throne, "but I guess we're about to find out." He pointed his cup towards the throne and his friend understood, nodding as the regent already began to speak and silence fell around her. "Dear friends, subjects, we welcome you to our audience today." The attendees all turned and listened intently as she explained, "We are pleased that you have come in such numbers to celebrate the positive progress of the war against the Aramarans. Things are going well for Samojija, so we would like to take this opportunity to express our deepest gratitude to all of you. To all those who support this battle, financially, materially. Go the thanks and respect of their queen and the people." Now the young wolf understood who these people were here. They were the financiers, the ones who kept the war going and generated high profits in Aramaria. Here we are, driven by greed, equal to man. It's disgusting what we're willing to do for money by now, he thought to himself, wondering what he and Iraq Lion, simple wolves, were doing here. They didn't fit in here, hadn't amassed nearly the wealth that some of the other wolves in this room had. He did not have to wait long for an answer, for his regent called out, "Moreover, the thanks of the entire nation go first and foremost to those who have decisively advanced this war and steered it to many stage victories. Iraq Lion, will you please join us?" Amarok and his former comrade in arms looked at each other in astonishment, and the one addressed didn't seem to quite understand. His equally confused friend instructed him with a motion of his head to go to her. So the soldier, critically eyed by the others, walked slowly to his queen and dropped to his knees. "My queen, what is your desire?" he asked submissively, lowering his head. With a noble hand gesture and a serious look, Serena asked him to stand up again, whereupon he followed and a maid came running with a chain including a golden pendant. She quickly put the chain on him, whose amulet shone and seemed to be very heavy. On it was the military symbol of the Samoyed armed forces. The girl gave the honored person a kiss on the cheek, alternately left and right, and ran away quickly. Uncomprehendingly, Iraq Lion looked at Serena, who finished with a "Thank you for everything, faithful Iraq Lion." She instructed him to stand to her left, whereupon he followed, standing next to her and folding his hands. Great applause began and the soldier bowed in embarrassment, which elicited a smile from his mistress. Iraq Lion has done great service as leader of the resistance movement in Thutpri and throughout Banadarija. Only through his tireless efforts has it been possible to keep the Aramaran butchers at bay, she explained. We promote you to commander over the entire Samojija force and give you all command of the military. By virtue of our office as regent, we decide, as it pleases the gods. What do you say to this? Yes, well, that's wonderful. The soldier stammered and his ruler nodded as he grinned broadly all over his face, feeling true joy. Amarok did not understand why people were so happy about a war. Is that how you satisfied people, by giving them rank? Was it really that simple? Were simple gifts supposed to heal the souls of wolves and make them forget that many of their friends had already perished in this war? Amarok, Serena now shouted, come now you to us. The wolf was in a hurry, because he didn't know how long the meeting of the warring parties in Aramaria would last. He didn't want to be late and traveled to the west of the Fox's capital with a teleportation tube. He got out and found that the images on television were true. Many diverse anthros had gathered to demonstrate by the thousands against the long, bloody war. There were crowds all the time, and the situation felt different when you experienced it directly instead of just seeing it on TV. Amarok wondered if the people really thought they could change anything with their shouts, banners and posters, which the rulers obviously did not want to change. Why would the powerful people care about their worries, fears and needs as long as they themselves were doing well or did not have to fear for the preservation of their power? What was the word of an entire nation still worth in a time when everyone seemed to be next to himself? The wolf aggressively fought its way through the crowds until he reached a barrier fence and security forces pushed him back into the crowd. Let me through. I want to talk to Chenerah. I want to go to the Kesar. Let me through. He kept shouting. But it didn't help, no one would let anyone in, and the male realized that a plan was needed to get into the well-guarded building. A solution had to be found quickly, so he looked around and tried to find another way. Again and again he was pushed away, further from the fence, until he voluntarily gave up and left the commotion. Damn it! He grumbled, standing a little apart and limiting himself to watching when someone approached him. Hey, wolf, a fox next to him suddenly said, guess you want to get in there too, huh? Startled, the male wolf looked at the questioner and said, who, me? Yes, of course, but it doesn't seem to go through the front door. I'll have to get in there another way. Do you have any idea how that might work? Everyone wants to get in, the fox then explained, but no one has made it yet. When you've found a way, let me know. I'd like to give these people a good smacking. Too bad they've blocked off most of the transport tubes around here. The tubes? The wolf didn't understand. What good are they to you? Well, how do you think all the food gets into the building? Of course there's a connection there. But, as I said, it's locked and apparently can only be accessed with special authorization. Amarok mused, if he had an infocom, he could try to unblock it. He might get in. But how would he get to Chenerah or one of the others? Furtively he examined his counterpart and noticed that the male fox was carrying something in his pocket. He immediately reached for it and pressed the fox firmly against a wall, whereupon the fox tried to fight him off and grabbed his arm. But Amarok kept a firm grip on the object and whispered sternly, "One word from you and I'll scream. Then everyone will know you have a gun. That's when your lights go out real quick. You wouldn't dare, wolf. Or, I'll just pull the trigger and shoot you," the Samo threatened, because he was absolutely sure that the tactile object had to be a shooting iron. "How do you know that's a weapon?" the Aramaran asked, not letting go of the wolf's arm. "It could also be that you approached me because you fancy me and that I now hold your erection in my hand. I don't believe in that, though. You're more the hard type, not a homo, right?" Amarok glared at him fiercely, clenching his jaws and not backing down a step. "Okay, Samo. You are right. What are we going to do now?" The detained man wanted to know, and with all his strength he resisted his opponent's grip. "I'll make you a deal, Ara. I want to end the war here and now, and I need your help," Amarok spoke strained. "If you let go, I'll be happy to listen to what you have to say. I won't shoot." "You have my word," the Aramaran replied and snorted. "All right. I'm going to let go now. Listen to what I have to say, fox." Immediately the Samoyeden let go and asked the other male for his name. "I am Josiah. Or Chucky, whichever you prefer. And you?" When Amarok mentioned his name, Josiah opened his eyes and laughed softly. "It can't be. You are the one who killed Carteron. It's madness that I should meet you. Should have said it right away. Of course I'll help you." "Okay, Josiah, I have a plan." The wolf spoke with relief. "Oh, don't," thought the wolf to himself, but went to her, according to her wish. He did not kneel, however, but remained standing, awaiting her speech. Confidently, he looked at her and everyone in the foyer was very quiet, expecting him to kneel. Serena looked at him, but she was not angry at his behavior, but seemed taken with the young wolf who stood motionless, unwavering, and rock solid. She eyed him and smiled with satisfaction as she said softly, "What a shining example of sincerity and sovereignty you are. We are impressed, Amarok, truly. Now be so good as to bend the knee for us, please. Let's let the masses see what the masses want to see." She deigned to ask one of her subjects for something. For her, an absurdity, majestic and authoritarian as she was. But here she made an exception, because Amarok proved that he had backbone and was by no means as small as everyone else in the room. Slowly, he bent the knee before his queen, who immediately stood up from her throne, delighted, and smiled smugly. She spoke, "Faithful Amarok. You have the special gratitude of the Empire and its people. You have done the greatest service to this land by destroying Carteron. We have heard that you have lost your boyfriend in the process. This is the greatest sacrifice a wolf is capable of making. Never can all the money in the world, all the thanks and all the tributes appreciate what you did for all of us when you executed the cruel despot. We invited you to thank you personally. However, you are not to receive any medal or promotion because, after all, you want nothing more to do with the war. Who can blame you?" "No medal, Your Majesty?" he interjected, interrupting his queen, an unforgivable faux pas in this country. "Then why have you summoned me if I am not to be showered with honor, money and power like everyone else here?" But his mistress forgave him even this cheeky gesture, because she sensed what her subject thought of the court and etiquette. He was self-confident, didn't mind serving, and always wanted to be his own independent master. He accepted authority, but only within narrow limits. This also impressed her, which in turn influenced her response. "Amarok, we know that medals, titles, and money mean nothing to you, for they will not bring your beloved back, nor will they simply end the war." "That is both very true, Your Majesty," whispered the male. "Your kind pleases us, because you are honest. Very refreshing. We usually surround ourselves with subjects who... Anyway. We make you another gift as a sign of our respect, dear Amarok. When this feast is over, stay a while and drink some wine with us in our chambers." Surprised by this offer, the male looked at her in amazement, because he knew that Serena had never made such an invitation before. It had to mean great respect and represent admiration on the part of the regent for him. The specificity of this offer did not leave the subordinate cold and he replied curtly, "It will be my pleasure to follow, my queen, Whereupon he quickly stood up, bowed and took his place on her right. "It will not only please us, Amarok, but likewise the gods," the lady said, making a hand gesture, whereupon the festivities continued along with music, food, and dancing. Josiah was to help Amarok execute his plan so he could get into the building, grab Chenerah, and talk straight. If the leaders of this world did not know reason, there had to be someone like him to teach it to them. So the wolf and his companion went to the nearby transport tube and Amarok explained what his idea was. "So, Fox. Surely you have your infocom with you?" "Of course. Like most of us basically." The Samoyeden asked for the device and tapped away at it until he was shown blueprints of the quarters where the meeting was taking place. He quickly realized that there was a room there that served as a food storage and was connected to the network of transport tubes. If this was not too heavily guarded, it would be a good starting point for further planning. "I'm going to hack this tube here and send myself right into the building," he then spoke. "Meanwhile, you see if you can start a little commotion to distract those soldiers. After all, you've got the gun. I'm still trying to unlock the back exit now. After all, I've got to get out of there, too. What do you say?" "That almost sounds like a good plan. The only problem is that I'll be the one putting myself in mortal danger. If they catch me with the gun, they'll wring my neck," the fox indicated. Amarok, however, placated. "You also want the war to end and the people to finally disappear, don't you? So make an effort and take the risk. I also have a dangerous part in this. You can always escape afterwards." Josiah nodded after a moment's thought. "If this works out, you owe me, Wolf. I'll see to the end of the war. I guess that will have to do." After they opened the tube and stood inside, Amarok said that if worst came to worst, he would buy him a few beers in heaven with the gods. "And what are you going to do once you're inside?" Josiah wanted to know, and Amarok explained that the rest of the plan depended on how the situation in the building turned out. "That's a great plan, Samo. Now I think we're going to die," the companion sighed loudly. "If you have a better idea, I'm very open-minded, Ara." When there was no reply, Amarok went to work and opened a flap on the wall, under which there were many colorful cables. Routinely, he unplugged some connectors while the fox stood in the entrance of the transport facility and stood lookout. "This will only take a little while. Keep your eyes open," the male wolf asked and Josiah nodded. Amarok paired a wire with the infocom and quickly tapped away on the device, whose display showed numerous security prompts and options. Chucky looked over his shoulder now and then and asked, impressed, "Not bad, Samo. Where did you learn to do that?" "Don't ask," he just blocked and continued typing intently. After a while, he shouted, "Done. That's it. The back door is open and the connection to the storage room is established." "Very good." The fox praised and said he was now going back to the demonstrators. "All right. Be careful. You'll know when I'm ready. And then you'll come up with something nice." Chucky nodded. "Now I guess we'll both get our revenge. You came in handy, Samo. You too. Good thing you had your infocom with you. Tell me more about what you would have done if I hadn't come, Josiah, and why." "You know," he explained, "I lost my mother a few days ago in an accident with one of those damn cars. She was already too old to understand these machines and appreciate the dangers they pose. Some damn bastard of a human being gets drunk and sits down in such a tin box and destroys my whole life with it. The Gajans killed my Chenerah and now I'm paying them back. If I were to start an uprising, maybe even die in the process, I thought, others would surely follow and finally put an end to the exploitation of our people. I wanted to start a bang. But now I can help you and think you have more guts than I do. Besides, I knew your friend Joliad and think that his death must not have been in vain." "You knew Joliad? I see. I guess it's just a coincidence that we met." The wolf nodded and looked up briefly to let his wolf goddess know that he had realized that she did intervene in the events of this world. Turning back to Chucky, he said, "I'm very sorry you lost your mother. I'm sure it's not easy. But if you do everything right, you don't have to die today. If there's no other way, though, you'll have to be prepared for the worst and shoot your own people if necessary. Then you'd be doing pretty much what you were going to do anyway." "That's right. But try to avoid going off too soon. Because then all hell would break loose here while I am locked up, and nothing would be gained. Trust me, It will work out. Let's do it together for Joliad, your mother, and for our nations. Let's wake up the sleeping. The wolf demanded and clenched his jaws. Good words, Samo. Let's wake up the sleeping people with a kick in their butts. Josiah rejoiced confidently and full of hope. He trusted that Amarok, who was not afraid to kill even a powerful dictator, had the ability, the guts and the brains to really move and change things. Now go ahead and let me know when it's time, he spoke, extending his hand to the wolf. The latter nodded and chimed in, after which the fox walked away and disappeared into the protesting crowd. The male strolled listlessly through the hall and observed at some point that his queen was saying goodbye to some guests at the entrance. Especially the women kissed and caressed each other extensively. Everything seemed very put on and exaggerated. Again and again loud laughter flared up from fine ladies and gentlemen, when after a while a servant asked the young male to follow him into the private rooms of the queen. Amarok went with him to a room where there was a huge table, set with 2 glasses and a bottle. Please wait here. Your queen will be with you shortly, the servant said, bowed and left. Amarok strode through the room with his arms folded behind his back and looked at the splendor. Large oil paintings showing abstract art hung everywhere. They were set in gold frames and were so large that they could just as easily have been used as wallpaper. Everything here seemed cluttered, clean and tidy. Serena was someone who loved luxury and lavishness, as well as style and order. All of this must have cost vast sums after all. Maintenance, cleaning and care could not be cheap either. He thought back to his conversation with Joliad. They had talked about the fact that there was a currency in all of Samojija, in Aramaria only in Bolmer. Was it better to have money, to let others work it out for your own luxuries? Was it right to work just for the sake of money, to pay taxes that others spent with their hands full? Suddenly the big door opened again and the wolf queen came in. The waiting man turned to her and said, My queen, there you are. Have the guests left? Our servants will take care of it. The pause hurt. We are no longer used to all this standing and walking. Wait here while we acclimatize a bit, Amarok, the she-wolf asked and disappeared into an adjoining room. Bored, the wolf sighed and continued to look at the room, while he thought about the fact that the distinguished gentlemen must all be very lazy, effeminate and unworldly. He had worked a lot on his parents' farm in his youth and knew aching paws too well. Joliad also felt the same way at that time. On the one hand, a few meters had to cover the entire weekly workload for a noblewoman, but on the other hand, the queen also bore a great responsibility, especially now in times of war. Serena came back in and with a wave of her hand instructed him to sit down on the sofa. Amarok, we have to talk to you, she said. What can I do for you, Your Majesty? You were in Carteron's tower, sending pictures of it to the troops, weren't you? That's right, he confirmed, nodding. Were you also in the basement vault of the headquarters? She continued to want to know, pouring red wine from the bottle into the glasses provided. She looked at him expectantly and handed him a goblet. No, the male shook his head, I'm afraid I was only on the first floor. Why do you ask? Her Majesty sighed and explained that Radovan Carteron had admitted at their meeting that he had made all the wolves disappear. After the destruction of the tower, we ordered our people to examine and remove the rubble. It turned out that there is a metal door in the basement. Unfortunately, we have not been able to open it yet. We thought you might have some information about what's behind it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you anything about that, my queen. I have only seen his gay statues. I don't even know where this door is supposed to be, the male regretted and took a sip. The reason we wanted to talk to you, she began, is this, we know where this door is and want someone to open it, whatever it may cost. You are the one who executed the tyrant. You should therefore also have the honor of providing access. Besides, we heard that you had a young fox for a friend who can surely help you. We know that you have lost him. However, you should search your memory for any information about this door that he may have sent to you without you realizing it. What should I look for? I don't have a key in my pocket, the wolf spoke, annoyed. Can't your people just blow this thing up? Well, that would probably be too easy, Amarok. The door is made of a material we haven't seen before. It's incredibly hard and resistant. The lady also took a sip of wine and continued explaining, blasting, sawing. You can do whatever you want, the material won't get a scratch. There exists no opening for a key, no scanner for biometrics. However, there seems to be some kind of microphone built in. This unusual information promptly aroused the curiosity of the male, who looked puzzled and hastily took another sip. So a spoken word is expected. That sounds exciting, Your Majesty. Imagine if there were treasures stored there. That would be a blast. What do I have to do to get this door open? As I said, we assume that this door has something to do with the disappearance of our people. It's probably not what you expect to find there, Serena suggested, asking Amarok to concentrate so that he would remember a password or code that Joliad might have somehow told him. And what, Amarok opined, if the thing doesn't respond to my voice? Maybe the thing only listens to the voice of Carteron. We think it's definitely worth a try. If need be, there are devices that can imitate the despot's voice. Can you remember a particular word or phrase of Joliad's? Why would Joliad of all people have known the code for this door? Why would he have shared it with me? If he had nothing to do with all this, then what? Her subject asked. It was quite absurd to him that his friend could have known anything about this, for, after all, he was never a person of importance to the other Aramarans. Why should Carteron have entrusted this information to him? After a moment's thought, the wolf remembered that he had met the spirit of his deceased friend some time ago. He had explained to him that it was important that he survive the coming hard times. He widened his eyes and said, "Of course." "What's wrong, Amarok? What's wrong? Do you remember anything?" asked Serena in wonder, looking expectant and curious at the same time. "That's it," he shouted joyfully, without answering her. "Come, my queen, let us go." He had a flash of inspiration, was completely beside himself, and now wanted to go to Bolmare as quickly as possible to solve the mystery of this secret door. "Sure, Amarok," the she-wolf agreed, "but won't you tell us what you're up to?" "Everything will be fine, Your Majesty, you'll see. Let's go to Bolmare." The tube closed and Amarok squinted his eyes, afraid that he would now teleport directly into the arms of guards. When the transport was completed, the wolf found himself in a dimly lit storeroom with many shelves filled with sacks and crates. The storeroom, perfect, he said to himself and carefully opened the access door so that he could peek through a narrow crack. He saw a hallway that was brightly lit and wolfish conversations could be heard in the distance. So there were some who were on guard here, and the wolf had to get hold of one of them to be able to move unnoticed in this building for as long as possible. He hurriedly took off his shoes and carefully observed the empty hallway, after he had equipped himself with a broom. He quickly closed the crack in the door, because a single wolf was just wandering in the hallway, right past the storage room. This was to be Amarok's opportunity. When the armed guard had passed, the intruder came out of the room and crept after him. While doing so, he kept a short distance, tiptoeing, which the pursued person did not notice. A sudden blow with the broomstick in the neck of the victim, followed by a low moan and a swoon, at which the young male shut the muzzle of the guard and dragged him backwards through the corridor. Straining, Amarok took the other wolf into the supply room and stripped off his top, tearing it into various sized shreds. He stripped the guard, whose uniform promised him the security he needed, and used his own clothes to tie him to a shelf by his arms and legs and gag him. Suddenly the prisoner opened his eyes and groaned in a daze. Amarok took his rifle and pointed at him threateningly. "I'm really sorry, brother," he said and slammed the gun under the guard's chin with force, causing him to lose consciousness again, this time probably for longer. The intruder adjusted his uniform and looked cautiously into the hallway. There was no one there and he had not been exposed. He walked past several doors and pulled the infocom with the building plan out of his pocket. He memorized the way, when suddenly a group of 3 soldiers approached him. He quickly stowed the device away and, with his head slightly bowed, looked toward the wall. The uniformed men were talking and didn't even seem to notice that Amarok was there, stealthily avoiding eye contact. His clothes served the purpose he had hoped for and he was sure to reach the large hall where Chenerah and the others must be undetected. "Hey, officer!" shouted one of the soldiers who had already walked a few steps past him. "Damn!" thought Amarok, stopping and not daring to turn around. "What is it, sir?" he then asked quietly, his heart pounding rapidly with fear. "Come over here. I want to ask you something," the soldier spoke in a firm voice and let his fellow soldiers go on. Should that be it now? Would they recognize Amarok as an intruder? What then? These questions flashed through the wolf's mind as he slowly turned around and pulled the cap he was wearing further into his face. Standing in front of the uniformed man, eyes trying not to look at him, he asked, "What's up?" "What is it, sir? Do you always walk around like that? You should take better care of your appearance, man. Your collar looks awful," the older man admonished, immediately tugging at Amarok's shirt collar to tidy it up. "Oh. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. It won't happen again, sir." "Very kind of you, sir," Amarok brought out and bowed. He tried hard to look subservient and goofy, and jerked his head a few times to make himself look mentally challenged and harmless. "My mom always irons the shirts," he said, shrugging again before the soldier seemed to buy his spiel. Yeah. Right. Your mom is always ironing. Right. Now get back to work. Just because you're handicapped doesn't mean you can stand around here being lazy," his counterpart demanded, pointing his index finger threateningly down the hall. Amarok let some saliva drip from his snout and saluted exaggeratedly tightly with a "yes, sir," which elicited an annoyed look from the other. "To let someone like you walk around with a gun. Watch out you don't hit yourself." As the soldier shook his head and sighed, the other wolf, who had played his part very well, passed him by unmolested and his excitement subsided. But the tension only disappeared completely when he had walked a few meters further and took a deep breath. "Oh man, that was pretty close." His play could have gone wrong. Surely he would not have been shot right away, nevertheless it was good that the young wolf had remained undiscovered. After all, in this building there was the last remaining possibility to end the war. She called herself Chenerah and sat in this large hall, in front of whose unguarded door he now stood, breathing deeply once again. No one expected to enter. After all, the building was surrounded by heavily armed wolves and everyone was denied access. What would Amarok expect? It was a question he had asked himself once before, when he and Serena set eyes on the basement of Carteron's seat of government. A little later, Amarok and Serena, surrounded by some soldiers, met in front of the former tower of Bolmer's seat of government, whose ruins were now provisionally supported with wooden beams. There was nothing left of its grandeur, just as there was nothing left of the grandeur of the Fox Empire. Some Samoyedans ran around with wheelbarrows, carrying away the rubble and debris stone by stone. The steps that the wolf had run down with his rescuer Chenerah some time ago were mostly destroyed. On them lay large, heavy boulders and parts of the statues that had previously lined the hallway. Amarok thought about the fact that any of these boulders could have hit him, could have meant his death. So much blood had flowed here, but it had already been washed away by some rain. The stench of blood, excrement and burnt flesh had disappeared and almost only wolves could be seen on the paths and squares. All the corpses, Aramaran and Samoyeden, had already been removed and efforts were now being made to ensure order and security. The eastern part of Bolmer was like a ghost town, while the western part of the city had been completely surrounded and declared a restricted zone. The phase of dismantling had begun, and when there would be a new construction, no one knew today. Almost all of the buildings were completely or partially destroyed and each of them was searched for remaining civilians. A group of them walked past Amarok and the Queen with their hands up and surrounded by warriors, watching them and looking into their faces. They were so covered with dust that their red fur had turned gray and they could almost have been mistaken for Samoyedans, had they not made an effort to hold their arms up as high as possible. Males and females, even children, were forced into this gesture of submission and demonstratively made to walk past Serena, the Queen and enemy. Their faces were petrified, wet and dirty, so that their blue and green, fearful-looking eyes stood out from the almost monochromatic mask. The mistress saw that her subject was looking at the Aramaran, and smiled confidently. "You see, loyal Amarok. This is what foxes look like when they realize that all their arrogance and greed for omnipotence no longer serve them. What happens to them now? Well, we see that you seem to have some compassion for them. Since you want to help us with the riddle of the door, we will give you their lives." "You decide," Serena offered, receiving a questioning look back from the male. "You want me to decide?" he asked uncertainly, and the she-wolf nodded mutely. "Then let them go. Let them flee. They all seem to be civilians and are no threat to us," Amarok demanded. "What do you mean?" the lady asked, puzzled. "If you give me their lives, I will decide to let them go. They deserve a second chance, Your Majesty." Impressed by this magnanimous demand of the younger, she called out to the group and told the gunmen that they could all leave. "Go to the west of the country. There you should be safe for the time being. Nothing will happen to you, for we command our soldiers to give you safe conduct, she said, whereupon some foxes looked relieved, others moved and had tears in their eyes. This wolf, Amarok, gives you your lives. Remember that it was a Samoyeden who saved you. Prove humility and do not repay it with further murder of wolves in the future. The prisoners' gazes turned to their rescuer, and for a few seconds the Arameran seemed to memorize what he looked like before they lowered their hands and, escorted by officers, left the square. The wolf got the impression they seemed to know each other. Perhaps they were a family he had just rescued. I thank you, my queen, he spoke, taking the hand of the fawn and kissing it. Our promise is valid, as are all our words, she returned, making a demanding hand gesture toward the ruin. The young wolf understood. Now he should fulfill his part of the agreement, which he should have done, however, even without the deal with his mistress. She was his queen and had no need to make a deal with one of her subordinates, for she would only have had to command. However, she did not have a heart of stone and recognized that Amarok was compassionate and caring. Her generosity was to show him that she was worthy of being the people's just, good-natured leader, even in times of war. As they slowly climbed the stairs, the rumble of dropped bombs could be heard somewhere in the distance, causing Amarok's tension to grow. How far inland might the battle have gone? Do not worry, young wolf, Chenerah spoke, we are safe here. These are wolfish bombs in Zlay and Sivist, southeast of Bolmare. Her companion nodded. We suspect the despot's son in the city named after him, Atamak. It is located in the west. The Samoyeden army is working its way there. As soon as his head rolls, you can be sure that this war will have come to a quick end. The Wolf Queen explained her further course of action, for she reckoned a quick victory over the foxes and believed it depended only on the death of the last male Carteron. Atamak had allowed himself to be taken away and was now probably cowering in fear in a bunker until he would be found and executed, or so wolfish fighters told each other. They descended a stone staircase and entered a sparsely lit basement, with several soldiers turning on their flashlights. This is the entrance, Amarok, Chenerah spoke, kneeling down and placing her furry hand on a shiny, metal surface embedded in the ground. The male followed her lead and stroked the metal plate, which had only a few small holes around the edge. And you are sure that one must speak into it, your majesty? He asked uncertainly and received a silent nod back. After a short pause, the Wolf Queen asked about the idea Amarok thought he had and cautioned that she didn't know if there would be endless attempts. We've already tried 5 or 6 times. Always, red streaks of light lit up the edges of the plate, which probably meant a futile attempt each time. Unfortunately, no one can say whether there will be only 5, 10, or 100 attempts before it won't open at all or some mechanism will be triggered. Be aware, Amarok, that each word may also be the last attempt. Her companion sighed loudly. Great news. I hope your Arameran is better than ours. But the male only smiled and said that he would surely pronounce the 4 words of Latin he needed now accurately, which gave the regent a questioning look. He remembered taking a photo of a fox statue in Bolmare, which looked admonishingly toward the sky. On its dedication, he could read the same words that his beloved had told him, asking him to persevere and fight through the difficult times ahead.